Hi, I'm going to tell you two stories and then we'll do an exercise, and through that, I'll try and convince you about the impact of stories on your data. Let's start with the first two stories. The first two stories are about doctors, and this is based in the 1800s. The first story is based in Austria, in Vienna, and the year is 1846. And Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis has just been appointed as the assistant doctor at the Vienna Public Hospital. Now, the Vienna Public Hospital is a teaching hospital, which means that while looking after its patients, it also teaches doctors. And in this public hospital, there were two maternity wards, one to teach interns or to-be doctors, and the other to teach midwives how to deliver babies. Now, during this time in the 1800s, there was a lot of mothers who died of childbed fever, or what was called puerperal fever. And the popular belief was that what was causing these deaths was miasma or poisonous air. And Dr. Semmelweis didn't believe that that was true, because his thing was that if it is poisonous air, then a lot of people should have died, or everyone should die. Everyone is breathing the same air. So he started collecting data. And when he collected the first 3-4 months of data, a big anomaly came out. What he saw was that almost 1 in 10 mothers, 10% of mothers, died while giving birth in the maternity ward run by the interns, whereas only 2.9% of mothers died in the maternity ward run by the midwives. So he started to figure out what was the differences or similarities between these two sections. So he looked at the procedures being used by the doctor and the midwives. He looked at whether the instruments were sanitized in the same way or not. And every time he found a difference, he equated them, but nothing changed. Then he started looking at stuff that shouldn't have impacted. For example, he looked at what time does the priest visit and made sure that two priests come at the same time, so the timing is the same. But nothing seems to have worked. His aha moment came with the unfortunate death of a very close friend of his called Jacob Koleska. Jacob Koleska was the person who did the autopsy. He was the pathologist of the hospital. And one day while Jacob Koleska was doing an autopsy, he cut his fingers. Yeah. And by evening, he had fell very sick. And the symptoms of his sickness seemed to Dr. Semmelweis as very similar to that of the mothers that died of childbirth fever. And the next morning, Jacob Koleska expired. So Dr. Semmelweis went to the authorities and requested that he be allowed to do the post-mortem on his friend. And when he opened up and did the autopsy, he figured out that the pathology of the dead body of his friend was very close to the pathology of all the mothers that died of puerperal fever. And that's when he realized that he had his sort of aha moment. He said that, all the students, the interns, they come here in the morning and there is autopsy done on all the dead mothers, and maybe they're carrying back something from the autopsy chambers into the maternity ward. Now you have to remember, this is about 2 decades before Louis Pasteur's discovery of germs. So he didn't know about germ theory or anything like that. So he called them death particles. So he said these guys are picking up death particles and they are taking it to the maternity chamber. So he instituted a hand wash process. The hand wash process was simple: a lime and chlorine solution, which people had to wash their hands in before they went to the maternity wards. And sure enough, the numbers started coming down. It came down to 1.9%, lower than the 2.9 in the other, in the midwife section. He still didn't believe why it should be 1.9, because it was definitely not miasma. So he started making sure that everyone did that. He saw that some of the young interns were bypassing the system, so he clamped down on that. And sure enough, for the next 3 months, there was no deaths in the section run by doctors. And so he now had his data. He ran to the authorities and said, see, this is it. Hand wash stops the people from dying, and they're dying because of death particles. And what did the authorities tell him? Dr. Semmelweis, you know nothing. It is miasma. And the more they told him that, the more he threw data at them. Every day's data was published and said 0 deaths today, 0 deaths the next day. And the more he threw data, the more they pushed back, the more angrier he got. And finally, he was thrown out of the hospital. And very quickly, the hand wash procedure was stopped, and up went the deaths. So that's one story. Now let's leave that behind and hop over across to the UK, to London. Yeah, and this is 1848, and we will be talking about Dr. Jon Snow. No, not that Jon Snow from the Game of Thrones, but Dr. Jon Snow, who lived in the 1800s. Now, This is again a city which has a lot of people dying of cholera this time. The one wave of cholera had just happened in 1846. This was the third wave. Cholera, as you know, started in India, traveled through China to Europe, and finally in 1833, the first wave happened in London. And every time a wave happened, hundreds and thousands of people died in London. And so it just so happens that Dr. John Snow had interned, even as a school-going child and in college, with doctors, and he'd seen these doctors struggle with the patients suffering from cholera. And now the popular belief at that point in time was cholera was caused by what? Miasma, poisonous air. And it was believable because London was a very stinky city. And why was it? Because the sewage systems were very, very rudimentary. Every house had a cesspit where all the stuff from the toilet went, and there were some rudimentary pipes running to the Thames, and the Thames was a very dirty river. And Dr. John Snow felt that there was something to do with not air, and so he started collecting data. He thought his aha moment had come when he collected the data where he saw that there was a street with rows of houses on both sides. In one side, there was a death in almost every house, whereas in the other side, there was a death in only one house. And he started trying to figure out that because if it's miasma, poisonous air, the air around both these sets of houses on two sides of a street would be the same. But he felt that there was something else. And then he saw that the design of the sewage was such that in both sides, the sewage pipes ran on the same direction. However, on one side, the bore well from where they took the water was downstream from the sewage pipe. So his belief was that people, when the first person died, the toilet stuff went into the cesspit. There were some leakages into the cesspit to the sewage pipe. The sewage pipe, as it passed the well, must have deposited some of the cholera-causing organism into that water. People drank that water and fell ill and died. Whereas on the other side, the well was upstream. So even if the sewage pipe carried and had leaks, it didn't go into the water. So with that, he went and started talking to the authorities. He's published a paper called The Mode of Communication of Cholera, but no one believed him. Now, he was a little more well-known than Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis. He was well-known as an anesthetist, and in fact, he had been called for Queen Victoria's last two children when they were born because he was the anesthetist who gave her chloroform to help with the childbirth. So he was pretty well-known. But despite that, all that data he collected didn't work with the authorities. What did the authorities tell him? Dr. John Snow, you have no clue, it is miasma. Now he didn't give up, unlike Dr. Semmelweis, and he didn't get angry. What he did was waited for the next round of cholera to see what happens. Cholera strikes London again, and this time it strikes very close to Dr. John Snow's house in Soho. And as soon as he finds out of this virulent version of cholera, he runs to Soho and he tries to go get into houses to ask people, how did people die, what happened? And they all bang their door shut. Obviously, here's a stranger. So he goes to the local church, the parish, and calls the priest from there, a person by the name of Henry Whitehead. Now he brings Henry Whitehead, and along with Henry Whitehead, he goes house to house to try and find out what happened, who are the people who visited, what happened before they died, what happened after they died, how did they fall ill. And while doing that, he created this famous map that you can see now, which is one of the world's first pieces of data visualization. What he did in this map was, every place, every house that someone died, he put a dash. And the more number of dashes mean more number of deaths. And then he put a circle wherever there was a water pump that was bringing water to that house, or wherever the nearest water pumps were. And what he saw was most of the deaths happened around this street called Broad Street, and the pump around which most of the deaths happened was at 40 Broad Street. Now he started investigating more and more, and he asked questions to people, and he found out that a sailor had come to visit an inn that was run by a lady on 39 Broad Street. The lady had a little daughter who then had dysentery and died, which is one of the big signs of cholera. And the baby in the records is called Baby Louis. Now, he went to Baby Louis's mother and found out more and asked, where did you throw the nappies? And she said, the cesspit. And the cesspit was right next to the 40 Broad Street pump. So he realized that this is exactly the same that he'd found out earlier, which is water is causing this. So he took that data, but he didn't run and jump into conclusion. He started looking at the other wells and people dying. Now you see a well here, which is far away from Broad Street, and a lot of people have died. And these people were nearer this pump. So why did people die here? What they found out is that out of the 9 houses here, 5 of the houses had children studying in Broad Street, and so they would have drunk water there. And 3 of them actually took water from the Broad Street pump because they liked the taste there. One family, he couldn't find the details. He then saw the workhouse. The workhouse is where it's like a hostel for working men, and a lot of people stayed there, but only 5 deaths. And he went there to find out that they had their own well, and so they were obviously drinking water from their own well. Then he went to the brewery on Broad Street, and he saw that's a huge brewery, a lot of people working, but no one died. And he found out that they didn't drink the water, they drank their own weak beer. Now with that data, he went to the authorities and he said, see, this is what happened. A sailor would have contracted cholera, and he came and stayed at this inn. And in the inn, he passed on that disease to the little girl. The little girl's nappies were thrown into the cesspit. From the cesspit, the particles went into the well. Everyone drank from that and then died. The municipality now believed him, and the first thing they did was went and took off the handle of the 40 Broad Street hand pump. And sure enough, cholera almost was stopped dead on its tracks. And then, of course, later they put him back, and if you go to Soho now, you will find the commemorative pump there without that handle. Now, obviously they believed him, because in the next round of cholera, you had this poster up where the municipality told the citizens that do not drink water till you have boiled it. So here's my question. What did the 2 doctors do differently? Both had data. And the answer is Dr. John Snow told a story. Dr. John Snow told a story of how that whole death had happened, and then supported it with his data, whereas Dr. Semmelweis was just throwing data. And that is the power of story. Right, let's start with the exercise. Right. Now imagine that you're the managing committee of a giant cement manufacturing company, and I'm the safety officer, and I have come in for my annual review. And when I come in and I put up this chart, and this is what I say. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a bad year. We lost 8 people. That's 33% more than the people we lost the previous year. And the non-fatalities major, where people have lost their arm or leg, have gone down by 14%, but that's still 12 of them. And the numbers that are going up there, which are non-fatalities minor and near misses, are really something that is worrying us. You know that every year I have come, every quarter I've come, and together we have discussed plans of how we can make this better. And then I've tried to implement them, but none of them seems to have worked. So I've looked across the world, and I found this boutique agency in Paris, 2 people who worked with some of the most complex industries in the world, including with some of our competitors. And they are pretty certain that if they can work with us for a year, they can bring us to world standards. My request to you in the managing committee is to sign off a project that will take a year and cost $500,000. Now I want you guys to think about, what would your response be to the safety officer, to me? Are you going to give me a go ahead? Are you going to ask for more data? Or are you going to say, sack this guy, he can't do his job, let's get the right guy? Make up your mind. I'll give you a few seconds, and then we'll do this exercise again. Okay, now, if you can erase and rewind right to the beginning, imagine that conversation never happened. I'm still the safety officer, you're still the managing committee. And this time I come in, and this is what I do. I put up this chart and say, about 6 months ago, I met Ramesh Menon's family. We lost Ramesh in the boiler accident in Jabalpur. And while we have given Ramesh's family an ex gratia payment of 5 lakhs, his wife was saying that she was very worried how she's going to bring up those 2 daughters and get them married. And just last week, I met Vivek. Vivek lost his right arm in the Bombay accident. We have committed to Vivek employment for life, but Vivek knows there is no hope in hell that he can get the same kind of jobs he could have got if he had his right arm. And Ramesh and Vivek are not alone. Last year, we had 8 Rameshes. That is 33% more Rameshes than the year before. And while we have had 14% less Viveks, that's still 12 Viveks. And those numbers that are shooting through the sky are nothing but Rameshes and Viveks waiting to happen. And you know this can't go on. Every quarter I've come and together we have made plans, but none of them seems to have worked. So this time I looked across the world and I found this boutique agency in Paris, two people who work with some of the most complex industries in the world, including some of our competitors, and they are pretty confident that if they can work with us for a year, they can bring us to world standards. My request to you is to sign up a project that will take a year and cost $500,000. Now again, take a call as to what will you say. Now most of you who were not giving me the money in the first time would now give me the money, yes or no? And why did that happen? Because what those numbers were earlier did not have context. What I did was use the story or two stories to get context to the data. So here's what you can do from now on. Whenever you're going to present some numbers, rows and columns, don't just throw numbers at people. Tell a story about those numbers. Because what is data? Data is nothing but a plural of anecdote, right? So take those little anecdotes that is behind the data and then share that. And with that, set context, and you'll see how decision comes much faster your way. And that is the power of stories used with data. Thank you.